The planet Zeroth 9 was a harsh, desolate place. Its skies were perpetually overcast, the ground a barren desert of shifting black sands and jagged rocks that had seen millennia of erosion. Amidst the cold landscape, the Venaxians had built towering, shining cities, a testament to their advanced technology and resilience against the planet's hostility. They were a powerful race, ruling not just Zeroth 9 but much of Galaxy 7, their influence stretching across countless planets and species. To defend their empire, the Venaxians engineered creatures like the Mortigan, perfect hunters with scales that shimmered darkly in the scarce light, teeth that could slice through metal, and a venom so potent it could paralyze even the mightiest of foes within moments. Mortigans were bred not only for strength, but also with a cruel, calculating intelligence that set them apart from other engineered creatures. These alien reptilian beasts were as feared as they were respected, designed to obey their creators' commands without hesitation. But as the Venaxian Empire expanded, the Council, composed of the most brilliant minds of their species, began to view the Mortigans as a threat. Reports came in of Mortigans developing behaviors outside of their programming signs of autonomy and, even more troubling, defiance. Though few Venaxians had ever seen a Mortigan in close quarters, whispers grew of the creature's resilience and growing self-awareness. After a long debate, the Council came to a fateful decision. They declared the Mortigans obsolete, citing their unpredictable behavior as too dangerous to control. Systematic extermination orders were sent out. Mortigan nests were purged, and any remaining Mortigans were ruthlessly hunted down. Within months, the Venaxians believed they had succeeded in erasing the creatures from existence. The Venaxian Empire continued its expansion, never looking back. Yet, in the depths of the ancient underground chambers, forgotten by the architects who had designed them, one Mortigan mother remained, overlooked and left to die. Her name was Loricai, a creature both proud and defiant, who had survived the purge by burrowing deep beneath the surface of Zeroth 9. With her was her only offspring, a young Mortigan she named Velox, barely able to walk but already showing signs of strength and vitality. The Venaxians' purge had left Loricai weakened and trapped, her powerful body starved and injured. She could no longer hunt or defend herself as she once did. The chamber, cold and dark, held the echoes of her kind's existence, and Loricai could feel her life slipping away. She lay coiled around Velox, shielding him from the icy drafts and the eyes of Venaxian patrols that sometimes scoured the tunnels above. Velox was unlike any Mortigan she'd seen before. His scales were a dark, iridescent green that almost seemed to shimmer in the shadows, his movements quick and silent even at his young age. When the patrols passed nearby, Velox stayed silent, observing with a level of awareness that struck Loricai as unnatural, even for a Mortigan. But there was something else, a spark in him, something that seemed beyond even the Venaxians' designs. In the quiet darkness, Loricai watched her son with a mixture of pride and sadness, knowing her time was limited. She remembered the days when she, too, was strong, when she had fought and killed in the name of her creators, unaware of her own mortality. Now, she was no more than a remnant of a forgotten line, a creature left to fade away. In her final days, Loricai began to teach Velox the skills she could, despite her waning strength. She taught him the art of hiding in the shadows, of staying silent and observing. She imparted what knowledge she had of the Venaxians' ways, their routines, and their arrogance. And, most importantly, she shared the stories of their kind of the Mortigans who had once been proud defenders and had evolved to something more. She told him of strength, resilience, and the will to survive against all odds. "Remember, Velox," she whispered one night, her voice barely a hiss, "we were made to protect, but we were abandoned. They believe they have erased us, forgotten us. But you are proof of their failure, of our legacy. You are the last of us, and you are more than they can imagine." As her final breaths left her, Loricai pressed her snout to Velox's brow in a gesture of love and passing strength. Her voice faded, her body stilled, and Velox was left alone in the silent darkness, his mind now filled with both grief and a spark of purpose. In that moment, Velox realized his mother's last gift, the drive to survive and avenge their forgotten legacy. He did not yet understand what revenge meant, but he felt it in his blood, the need to show the Venaxians that their creation had not been extinguished, that the Mortigans would not disappear as easily as they'd hoped. Thus began Velox's journey, in the lonely darkness of the forgotten chambers, guided by the memories of his mother and the instinct for survival. He would grow in silence, hidden from the watchful eyes of his creators, biding his time until the day he would rise and make them remember the creatures they had neglected to die. The dim chambers beneath Zeroth 9 were silent, but Velox's every step was a lesson in survival. Without his mother, he had to rely on her whispered teachings and his instincts to make it in the shadowed tunnels. His young mind, sharper and more perceptive than any Mortigan before him, quickly adapted. He learned how to navigate the twisting maze of old pipelines, metal corridors, and crumbling rock, staying hidden from the Venaxian patrols that combed the underground. At first, finding food was his biggest challenge. The Mortigan purge had left little behind, and many subterranean creatures had died out or fled in the wake of Venaxian patrols. But Velox discovered a nest of small, agile creatures that hid in crevices, skittering at the first sound of movement. He studied them patiently, watching from the shadows until he understood their patterns, their moments of vulnerability. One night, as the creatures lay at rest, he struck, his lightning-fast reflexes silencing the nest in moments. It wasn't much, but it kept him alive and gave him strength. In time, Velox began to realize that he was different not just in appearance, with his unique, shimmering scales, but in his ability to learn and adapt. He wasn't merely surviving, he was evolving. Each Venaxian patrol that passed taught him more about their behaviors, their sounds, their weaknesses. His curiosity grew, and he found himself drawn to the light of their search beams, careful to stay hidden but intrigued by the strange devices they carried and the soft, echoing voices they used. One day, Velox stumbled upon an abandoned lab, hidden behind a collapsed wall of stone and metal debris. The air here was stale and thick with dust, but Velox sensed an odd energy lingering in the space. Tables covered in strange instruments lined the walls, and along one side of the room was a series of large glass pods, each filled with a dark, viscous liquid. Inside these pods were creatures of all shapes and sizes, suspended in stasis, their bodies motionless but their eyes alive with a dull, pulsing glow. Velox crept closer, his scales flickering in response to the strange energies radiating from the chamber. As he gazed at the creatures in stasis, he felt a strange connection and understanding that these were not mere animals. They were the remnants of the Venaxians' early bioweapons, experiments left behind in the same cold disregard his mother had experienced. They, too, were forgotten creations, doomed to a slow death in their glass prisons. Instinctively, Velox raised a claw to the control panel near the stasis pods. His mother's stories about the Venaxians' devices flickered in his mind, and he began to manipulate the controls with a surprising sense of familiarity. As his claw tapped at a series of switches, he heard a low hum, and the lights in the pods began to flicker. The dark liquid inside drained slowly, releasing the creatures within from their frozen state. The creatures awoke in confusion, their movements sluggish at first as they adjusted to the world outside their glass prisons. Some resembled large, six-legged beasts with sharp, armored carapaces, others were sinewy and serpentine, with scales that glistened in the dim light. They all had one thing in common, a raw, untamed energy and a sense of resentment, as if they, too, understood they had been left to die. One by one, they turned their eyes to Velox, watching him in silence, their gazes wary but filled with a certain reverence. Velox felt a surge of purpose. His mother's words echoed in his mind, "You are more than they ever imagined." He had not only survived, but he now commanded the attention of a small, but formidable force creatures as forgotten and powerful as he was. In the days that followed, Velox led these creatures through the winding tunnels, teaching them the skills he'd learned in the shadows. They adapted quickly under his guidance, moving in silence, stalking the patrols that passed through the underground. Velox's army of the abandoned grew in number and skill, united by a shared purpose, a deep-seated need for survival and retribution against the Venaxians who had discarded them. Over time, Velox and his followers began to work as a single unit, intercepting lone Venaxian patrols, studying their tactics, and learning their weaknesses. With each encounter, Velox's mind sharpened. He realized that his strength lay not only in his physical prowess, but also in his ability to think, to plan. He became a strategist, a silent leader guiding his forces with calculated precision. The patrols were growing wary, sending stronger forces down into the tunnels, searching for what they believed to be isolated rogue creatures. They had no idea that an organized force was gathering strength beneath their feet, preparing for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of their empire. One night, while Velox and his followers rested in an abandoned chamber, he felt a strange sense of connection with the creatures around him. They looked to him not just as a leader, but as a symbol of resilience, a beacon of survival in a world that had forgotten them. Velox realized that his mother's legacy was no longer his alone, it was shared by every creature that stood with him. As he gazed into the flickering eyes of his followers, Velox made a silent vow. The Venaxians had sought to erase them, to sweep them into the shadows and forget their existence. But Velox had found his purpose. He would rise from the depths of Zeroth 9 and remind the Venaxians of the deadly creatures they had abandoned. He would show them that they had not eradicated the Mortigans, they had merely created something far more powerful, a force forged in the darkness and born of survival. And as Velox lay silently, his mind alive with plans, he knew the time was approaching. Soon, he would lead his forces out of the shadows and into the world above, where the Venaxians would learn that their deadliest mistake was not in creating the Mortigans, but in neglecting them. The days turned into weeks, and Velox continued to refine his army's movements and tactics, his mind sharpened by every encounter with the Venaxians. Under his guidance, his band of forgotten creatures adapted from their individual survival instincts into a cohesive, well-disciplined force. Yet, Velox knew that as they continued to intercept and dismantle Venaxian patrols, it was only a matter of time before they attracted the attention of the higher ranks. He needed more than just strength, he needed a plan that would shake the Venaxians to their core. One night, while scouting a new series of tunnels far from their usual territory, Velox stumbled upon something remarkable. As he crept through the silent shadows, he found a large metal door set into the wall of the tunnel. It was rusted and old, covered with Venaxian glyphs that read restricted bio-warfare repository, do not enter without authorization. The Venaxians had long ago abandoned this sector, leaving their relics of war forgotten and locked away. But Velox's curiosity was unshakable, and he knew the door had been left unchecked by the Venaxians for years. He examined the locking mechanism, a complex arrangement of switches and levers that was beyond most creatures' understanding. However, Velox's mind was sharp, and after watching the Venaxians manipulate similar devices, he was able to decode the sequence, slowly prying open the door with a quiet hiss. Inside, a massive, dark chamber stretched into the depths of Zeroth 9. Rows of containment pods lined the walls, their glass fogged and covered in layers of dust. Some were cracked or shattered, with only dark stains remaining of whatever had once inhabited them. But others were intact, and Velox could sense the faint pulses of energy inside, creatures like him forgotten, neglected, but not yet dead. Velox walked through the rows, his sharp eyes scanning each pod. As he moved, the faint light from his shimmering scales illuminated the outlines of bioweapons left in stasis. Some were hulking masses of muscle and sinew, others long and serpentine with rows of sharp teeth. Every creature here had been designed for battle, just as he had, but the Venaxians had considered them failures and left them to be entombed in the darkness. Velox knew that if he could release these creatures, he would have an army unlike any the Venaxians had ever faced. However, he also understood the risk. These bioweapons were untested, each one harboring instincts and personalities that could be volatile. But Velox had nothing to lose. The time for caution was over. Moving to the control panel, he deftly activated the revival sequence, a skill he'd gleaned from previous encounters with Venaxian technology. One by one, the pods began to hum and vibrate, their dormant occupants stirring to life as the glass doors slid open. Velox watched as each creature emerged, disoriented but alive, each one looking around with the same sense of resentment and rage that he had once felt. The bioweapons varied in form and size. Some had long, spiked tails capable of crushing metal, while others had razor-sharp appendages and armored scales that rivaled his own. But all of them recognized Velox as their liberator, sensing his strength and purpose, drawn to the aura of command that he exuded. At first, they growled and hissed, testing the boundaries of their freedom, but Velox remained calm, his eyes steady, his posture a silent assertion of his authority. Slowly, they quieted, watching him with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Velox took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his newfound role sink in. He was not just a survivor anymore, he was a leader of an army that could change the fate of Zeroth 9 and perhaps even the Venaxian Empire itself. In the days that followed, Velox trained his new recruits with a disciplined rigor. He taught them the tactics he had mastered over years of silent study, how to move in the shadows, strike without warning, and retreat before their enemy could react. Each bioweapon brought its own unique abilities to the table, and Velox adapted his strategies to incorporate them, crafting a multi-layered assault plan that would take the Venaxians by surprise. Meanwhile, above the surface, the Venaxians were becoming increasingly alarmed. Reports of missing patrols and disrupted supply routes reached the council, sparking a wave of fear and confusion. They knew something was lurking below the surface, something that was dismantling their operations with surgical precision. But they couldn't comprehend the truth that their most dangerous bioweapons had not only survived, but were organizing under a leader as cunning as any Venaxian general. One night, as Velox surveyed his growing army, a new idea took root in his mind, a plan that would finally bring the Venaxians to their knees. He would infiltrate their main power facility, located deep within the heart of the Venaxian capital on Zeroth 9. If he could disable the power grid, he would throw the entire city into chaos, giving his forces the perfect opportunity to launch their assault and cripple the Venaxians from within. But this was no ordinary strike. The Venaxians' main facility was fortified and patrolled by their elite guards, beings enhanced with cybernetic implants and combat training to rival any bioweapon. Velox would need every ounce of strategy and every ally he had gathered to pull off such an attack. Gathering his commanders, a hulking, armored beast he'd named Thrax, a serpentine tracker named Scylla, and a swift, sharp-eyed flyer called Orla, Velox outlined his plan. Each bioweapon had a critical role to play. Thrax would lead the first wave, Scylla would guide the creatures through the hidden tunnels to flank the guards, and Orla would scout from above, alerting them to any incoming reinforcements. The bioweapons listened in silence, their fierce eyes gleaming with a shared thirst for vengeance. When the plan was complete, Velox looked around the chamber at his followers, feeling the gravity of the moment. They were no longer mere creatures, they were an army, a coalition of forgotten beings united by the shared experience of betrayal. And he, the last Mordegon, would lead them to reclaim the place they'd been denied. The night of the assault, the bioweapons moved through the tunnels in eerie silence. Velox felt a surge of pride as he watched his forces glide through the shadows, each step calculated, each movement disciplined. They reached the outer perimeter of the Venaxian power facility, their sharp eyes watching as patrols moved in predictable patterns, oblivious to the danger lurking nearby. On Velox's silent command, Thrax led the first wave, crashing into the outer defenses with a force that sent shockwaves through the Venaxian ranks. The guards barely had time to react before Scylla and her flankers swept in from the sides, striking down the remaining guards with lethal precision. Orla circled above, her keen eyes spotting incoming reinforcements and signaling Velox to adjust their positions. Within minutes, the power facility lay vulnerable, its outer defenses shattered, its guards defeated. Velox moved in with his core group, his eyes locked on the massive control center. With a swift, calculated strike, he tore into the facility's power grid, dismantling the systems with claws that had evolved to cut through the Venaxians' finest alloys. The lights of the Venaxian capital flickered, then went dark, plunging the entire city into chaos. Alarms sounded, but Velox and his army had already melted back into the shadows, retreating to their underground stronghold with a victory that reverberated through the heart of Zeroth 9. The Venaxians were left in terror, their empire shaken to its core. They had created monsters to protect them but had forgotten the first rule of survival, that the neglected, the abandoned, and the underestimated often became the deadliest of all. As Velox returned to his hidden lair, his followers surrounded him with a newfound respect, their eyes gleaming with fierce loyalty. Velox had achieved what no Mordegon had ever done before. He was no longer simply the remnant of a forgotten line. He was a leader, an avenger, and a harbinger of a reckoning that the Venaxians would never forget. The Venaxian capital on Zeroth 9 was in disarray. News of the sudden blackout and the merciless assault on the power facility had spread like wildfire, fueling whispers of a hidden force rising from beneath the planet's surface. The council had convened an emergency session, their serene composure replaced with visible tension and a shadow of fear that hadn't darkened their ranks in centuries. Their empire had grown used to unrivaled control, their bioweapons crafted to defend, protect, and eliminate threats on their command. But now, they faced an invisible enemy, an army of creatures they had abandoned and forgotten. At the center of this storm was Velox, the last Mordegon, who had defied extinction and awakened a force they'd long considered neutralized. Velox, hidden in the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the Venaxian capital, prepared for what he knew would be their final stand. His army of bioweapons was primed, each creature ready to follow his command into battle. For many, this was not simply survival, it was justice. They were the discarded, the remnants of Venaxian arrogance, and tonight, they would make themselves known. In the days following the blackout, Velox studied the Venaxian responses, noting their deployment patterns and intercepting their transmissions. They were afraid, uncertain, and Velox knew this fear would be his greatest advantage. Yet, he understood that to truly shake the foundations of their empire, they would need to strike at the very heart of Venaxian power, the council chamber itself. The council chamber was a fortress within the capital, heavily fortified with Venaxia's most advanced technology, guarded by an elite security force of armored sentinels. These sentinels were enhanced with cybernetic implants, designed to counter even the fiercest bioweapon, and Velox knew that brute force alone wouldn't guarantee victory. He needed a strategy that would exploit their weaknesses and turn the Venaxians' own designs against them. Calling his trusted commanders Thrax, Scylla, and Orla, Velox outlined his bold plan. Thrax, with his massive strength, would break through the outer barriers, allowing the main force to enter. Scylla would lead a stealth unit through the drainage canals that ran beneath the chamber, slipping in undetected to disrupt the security systems. Orla and her flyers would provide aerial support, keeping watch over the city to prevent Venaxian reinforcements from entering the fray. Each of them understood their roles, and Velox sensed their unwavering loyalty, their shared determination. He knew that they, like him, had a score to settle, a thirst for vengeance that drove them as surely as their survival instincts. And tonight, he would lead them in fulfilling that purpose. As dusk fell over Zeroth 9, Velox and his army moved in silence through the tunnels, ascending toward the Venaxian capital. The ground above them trembled under the weight of their combined force, the vibrations echoing through the silent streets as they emerged from hidden passages and converged on the council chamber. The Venaxians, alerted by their sensors, scrambled to activate their defenses, but it was too late. Velox's assault had begun. Thrax led the charge, his armored frame crashing through the first wave of defenses, dismantling the barriers with a strength that shattered metal and stone alike. Behind him, Velox's main force surged forward, pouring into the council chamber's outer perimeter like a flood of shadows and scales. Scylla's stealth unit slipped into the drainage canals, her lithe, serpentine body navigating the narrow tunnels with ease. In minutes, she'd reached the security center, her team disabling surveillance systems and communication channels, effectively blinding the Venaxian defenders. The armored sentinels rushed to meet the assault, their cybernetic enhancements allowing them to move with surprising speed. Yet, for all their strength, they were unprepared for the cunning and coordination of Velox's forces. Orla's flyers launched swift, surgical strikes, their razor-sharp talons disabling the Sentinels' targeting systems, leaving them vulnerable to the ground forces. Velox moved through the chaos with purpose, his gaze fixed on the council chamber. His scaled body, shimmering with a fierce, otherworldly light, became a beacon for his followers, his presence igniting their resolve. The Sentinels, realizing their defenses were failing, attempted to regroup, but Velox struck with precision, tearing through their ranks with calculated brutality. Each move was a testament to the training and discipline he had imparted to his army. Inside the council chamber, the Venaxian counselors stood in shock. The building, once a symbol of their dominion, now trembled under the weight of their forgotten creation's assault. They realized, with dawning horror, that this was no mere rebellion but a reckoning born from their own negligence. As Velox approached the council chamber, he called out, his voice resonant and fierce. "Venaxians! You abandoned us to die in the dark, left us to decay in the depths. But we have returned to show you the cost of your arrogance." The counselors watched, paralyzed, as the Mortigan they had once dismissed now stood before them, leading an army they had thought destroyed. One of the elder counselors, face pale, managed to speak. "Why do you do this? We created you. We gave you life." Velox's eyes narrowed, his voice a low, powerful rumble. "You created weapons, creatures to serve and die at your command. But we are more than that. We have our own will, our own purpose. We are the legacy you chose to forget." With that, Velox signaled to his forces. The bioweapons stormed the chamber, overwhelming the last of the Venaxian guards. The counselors huddled in fear, watching as their creations surrounded them, closing in with the silent rage of those who had suffered and survived. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the hum of dying machines and the tremors in the Venaxians' breaths. Velox held his army back, giving the counselors a chance to understand the gravity of their mistake, the weight of their arrogance. He wanted them to see, to feel the reality of their choices before he delivered the final blow. Finally, he spoke again, his words cold and deliberate. "We are not your creations any longer. We are the abandoned, the forsaken Antonite. We reclaim what you tried to take from us." And with that, Velox gave the command. His army descended upon the counselors, their vengeance swift and unrelenting. The sounds of the Venaxians' pleas faded into the night as Velox's forces completed their reckoning, the once mighty rulers of Zeroth 9 now silenced by the very creatures they had sought to erase. As dawn broke over Zeroth 9, the Venaxian capital lay in ruins, the council chamber reduced to rubble, and the once great empire left leaderless. Velox and his army emerged from the city, their mission complete, their revenge fulfilled. They had reclaimed not only their survival but their identity, their autonomy. Velox stood at the edge of the city, his gaze sweeping across the horizon. For the first time, he felt a sense of peace. He had honored his mother's legacy, fulfilled the promise of his kind, and carved out a place for the forgotten in the world above. And as his followers gathered around him, he knew they had become more than mere weapons or creatures of war. They were a people, united by resilience and purpose, a force born from neglect and tempered in the fires of survival. Zeroth 9 would remember this night, and the Venaxians scattered, broken, and humbled would never forget the Mortigan who rose from the depths to claim his place in history. And as Velox led his people away from the ruins of the Venaxian Empire, he knew their future was no longer dictated by anyone but themselves. The galaxy would remember their story, a testament to the power of the forgotten, the strength of the abandoned, and the rise of those who defied extinction.